I'm going to borrow liberally from a statement that was made earlier. The one certainty in the Middle East is uncertainty and volatility. Well, to help me decipher the reshaping of the Middle East, I'm privileged to have Cengiz Candar, who's a journalist with the Radikal newspaper and a former war correspondent, Shafeeq Ghabra, who is a professor of political science at Kuwait University. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I borrowed your statement, which is the one certainty in the Middle East is uncertainty and volatility. But, you know, Nowadays.
Yes.
But, you know, I want to focus on a phrase we used to describe the events in the Middle East, which is the Arab Spring. And you contest that phrase itself. Why?
Because it's misleading. Because at the origin, it just defined what has happened in Tunisia and Egypt, as I've said today, that they were relatively peaceful transitions and transformations of regimes. But then it just earned a violent aspect, the developments elsewhere in Yemen, particularly in Syria itself. So then those who qualified the developments as Arab Spring started to speak of Arab Winter. So it's not a climactic or seasonal things that are taking place in the region. It's a historical era, so we have to be approaching it in more sociological terminology and define it in other words. And the Arabs themselves who participate in this colossal change is preferring the word revolution that is taking place. It's much more exciting and better definition of what's taking place.
While we're on the subject of definitions, I don't want to get stuck in semantics, but you know, we refer to it as the reshaping. How do you view the reshaping? What is the reshaping? What is it? The reshaping of the Middle East.
It is the reshaping, and it is a transformation. It is a long transformation, second independence, awakening of people's power, grassroots power, awakening of the power of youth to be engaged and to create a world that looks more like them, freer, more representation, democratization, more equality, social justice, a sense of economic justice. That's basically an attempt to end the kind of authoritarianism that has ruled the region for several decades and produced minimal results.
But this attempt to change and to reshape is going to be perhaps a long-drawn one and bring with it anxiety and uncertainty for those in the area, for those observing. You know, what would you say to calm them, in a sense, to observers who are watching the events there? I mean, here in India too, we've been following those events. But what should we take away from them?
So there are two kinds of events. There are revolutions in certain places, and they're just beginning to go through the nature of the state and the nature of government and the nature of politics and the kind of political, economic, cultural transition they would like to see happen. It's more opening of the system and more representation and more accountability and more transparency and clarity on issues of corruption and rotation of power. But also you have countries that has not gone through revolution, but yet they do have a beginning of or already on its way of reform movements that are seeking goals that are more representation and more accountability, etc. And this is happening in the monarchies of the region. So the advice to those who have not gone through revolution, do meaningful reform within the coming 3 to 5 years in order not to have one. Because revolutions, yes, end up being problematic, end up taking a lot of time to reconcile and consolidate into a new transition. The price is high, but yet those who revolted in the region didn't have much choice. They've waited and waited and waited, and things only deteriorated. At the end of the day,
and this is their response. They rebelled. Would it be fair to say that, in a sense, in a broad sense, all of these movements are bringing these countries, these nations closer to democracy?
Yes, I think so, because it is actually an explosion of, a popular explosion against autocratic regimes that they have been witnessing since decades. So it's a revolt.
But you know, are there any risks in that quest for democracy or that path to democracy? Are there some risks of it being usurped along the way?
But they can get it back. The most important thing, I think, with what's happening in the region, from the shores of Atlantic, from the other end of North Africa, all the way to the shores of the Gulf, the people is entering into the stage of history by themselves, by no-named individuals forming societies, feeling themselves as dignified peoples that are entering into the stage of history. So there might be ups and downs, deviations, distortions, usurpation of their good intentioned aspirations, but at the end of the day, as much it's an undertaking of millions of people, it will end up in regimes that is compatible with human dignity and human aspirations and human nature. So that if we are not thinking of democracy only in terms of abstract concepts, but a regime that is compatible with the human nature, it will end up in that. So it will be as if asking the millions of Indian people, just for the sake of stability, stay calm and don't ask anything from the British Raj, stay in it. But
it's equivalent to that.
More or less.
And we should remember that. Well, I'm going to leave it at that, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your insights. Although I've forced them to be brief, appreciate them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure.